Dr. Lisa Rodriguez had always been fascinated by the stars, ever since she was a little girl. She would sneak out onto her family's rooftop just to stare at the night sky, wondering if anyone was looking back. Now, at 34 years old, she spent her nights doing exactly that, but with much bigger equipment. The SETI Institute in California was her dream job. She worked with massive radio telescopes that could pick up signals from deep space. Most nights were quiet, filled with nothing but static and the occasional burst from a distant pulsar. But Lisa never got tired of listening. She believed that, somewhere out there, someone was trying to communicate. It was a Tuesday night in October when everything changed. Lisa was alone in the control room, surrounded by dozens of computer screens showing wave patterns and frequency readings. The coffee machine hummed in the corner, and the only other sound was the quiet whir of cooling fans. She had been working for 12 hours straight, analyzing data from a particularly interesting region of space near the constellation Orion. Her eyes burned from staring at screens, but she couldn't shake the feeling that tonight was different. The signals coming from that region seemed almost organized, not random like usual cosmic noise, but with a pattern she couldn't quite figure out. She adjusted the frequency settings and leaned back in her chair, rubbing her tired eyes. That's when she felt it, a strange tingling sensation, like the air itself was changing. The temperature in the room seemed to drop a few degrees, and the hair on her arms stood up. Lisa looked around, confused. The air conditioning wasn't that strong, and the building's heating system had been working fine all day. She turned back to her screens. But something caught her eye in her peripheral vision. There, standing near the window that overlooked the telescope array, was a figure she hadn't heard enter. Lisa's heart jumped into her throat. Security was supposed to be tight in this facility. "Excuse me," she started to say, turning in her chair. "You can't be in here without proper." The words died in her mouth. The person, if it was a person, was unlike anyone she had ever seen. Tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to glow with a soft, pearl-like light. The being's features were delicate but somehow ancient, with large eyes that held depths Lisa couldn't begin to understand. Those eyes weren't threatening, though they looked worried. Lisa's scientific mind immediately began cataloging details. The being wore what appeared to be a seamless garment that shifted between silver and blue. Depending on the angle of the light, its movements were fluid, almost like it was floating slightly above the ground. But what struck her most was the expression on its face, genuine concern. The kind you might see on a friend's face when they're worried about you. The being stepped closer, and Lisa found herself unable to move, not because she was paralyzed with fear, but because something about the presence felt strangely calming. The being raised one long, elegant hand in what seemed like a greeting, and then Lisa heard words, not spoken aloud, but somehow peering directly in her mind. "Why? Are you looking there?" The voice was gentle but urgent. "Is it too big?" Lisa blinked hard, sure she was hallucinating from too much caffeine and not enough sleep. But the being remained, still looking at her with those concerned eyes. The voice came again, clearer this time. "The pattern you seek, it grows beyond safe limits. Why do you search in that direction?" What?" Lisa managed to whisper. Her rational mind was screaming that this couldn't be real, but every instinct told her it was the most real thing that had ever happened to her. The being moved closer to her workstation, its glowing eyes scanning the screen showing the Orion region data. Its expression grew more troubled. "You carry the mark. You should not be looking there. It will notice you." Lisa wanted to ask what mark. What would notice her? But the being suddenly straightened up, its head tilting as if listening to something she couldn't hear. The concerned expression deepened. "I cannot stay. They track my presence here. But you must stop looking in that direction, for your safety and ours." "Wait," Lisa called out, finally finding her voice. "What mark? What are you talking about? Who are you?" The being paused at the window. "I am Zara, and you are connected to more than you know. The mark on your shoulder, it is why we found you. It is why you are in danger." Lisa's hand unconsciously moved to her left shoulder, where she had always kept hidden a large, unusual birthmark. She had been self-conscious about it her entire life. It was dark and strangely shaped, almost like a complex geometric pattern. How could this being know about it? Your birthmark is not what you think it is, Zara continued, her mental voice growing fainter. We will meet again when it is safer. Until then, please, look elsewhere in the sky. The air in the room began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from summer pavement. Zara's form became less solid, more like a mirage. Wait, Lisa stood up, quickly, knocking her chair backward. I need to understand. What's happening to me? But Zara was already fading. Her final words echoed in Lisa's mind. Be careful, Dr. Rodriguez. You are more important than you realize. And then she was gone. Lisa stood alone in the control room, heart pounding, staring at the spot where the impossible visitor had been. The screens continued showing their data. The coffee machine kept humming, and everything appeared exactly as it had been before. Except for one thing, the air still held a faint, sweet scent. Like flowers blooming in starlight. She slowly walked to the window where Zara had stood. There was no sign anyone had been there, no footprints or disturbance. But Lisa knew, with absolute certainty, that what had just happened was real. The question was, what did it mean? Looking down at her screens, she realized she was still receiving those organized signals from the Orion region, the same region Zara had warned her away from. Lisa's scientific curiosity battled with the memory of genuine fear in those ancient eyes. What had Zara meant about the mark, about being connected to more than she knew? And most importantly, what exactly was out there in space that was apparently? Looking back, Lisa touched her shoulder again, feeling the familiar raised skin of her birthmark beneath her lab coat. For the first time in her life, she wondered if there was more to it than just a random quirk of genetics. As she sat back down at her workstation, one thought kept repeating in her mind. Her life had just become infinitely more complicated. The next morning, Lisa woke up feeling like she had been hit by a truck. Her head throbbed, and for a moment, she convinced herself that the entire encounter with Zara had been nothing more than a vivid dream, brought on by too much work and too little sleep. But when she rolled out of bed and caught sight of herself in the bathroom mirror, all doubts disappeared. There, on her left shoulder, was her birthmark. But something was different about it. The dark, geometric pattern seemed more defined than usual, almost like it was slightly raised from her skin. Lisa leaned closer to the mirror, her heart starting to race again. The lines were definitely more pronounced, and when she touched it, there was a faint tingling sensation she had never felt before. This is impossible, she whispered to her reflection. At work that day, Lisa found herself constantly distracted. Every time someone walked past her office, she would look up, half expecting to see Zara's glowing form. But it was just her colleagues going about their normal routines, completely unaware that their world might have just become a much stranger place. During lunch break, Lisa locked her office door and pulled up her computer's internet browser. She felt ridiculous typing alien encounters birthmarks into the search engine. But she had to know if anyone else had experienced something similar. What she found surprised her. There were dozens of accounts from people all over the world who claimed to have met beings from other worlds. But more interesting were the stories that mentioned physical marks or unusual features that the visitors had seemed to recognize or comment on. A farmer in Nebraska wrote about a glowing woman who had pointed to a scar on his hand and said it was a sign of connection. A teacher in Japan described a tall, luminous man who had stared at a mole on her neck and warned her about growing patterns. A mechanic in Germany claimed that an otherworldly visitor had touched a birthmark on his back and told him he was marked for protection. Lisa's hands trembled as she read story after story. The details varied, but the theme was always the same. These beings seemed to recognize certain physical markings as significant, and they always expressed concern or urgency about something the person was doing or about to do. That evening, Lisa stood in front of her bedroom mirror with her shirt off, studying her birthmark more carefully than she ever had before. It really did look like some kind of symbol or pattern. The lines curved and intersected in ways that seemed almost mathematical, like a complex equation written on her skin. She took several photos with her phone and uploaded them to her computer, then used imaging software to enhance the contrast and sharpen the details. What she saw made her sit back in her chair with a gasp. The pattern wasn't random at all. It looked remarkably similar to some of the astronomical charts she worked with, specifically the kind that showed dimensional mathematics and theoretical space-time maps. How was that even possible? Over the next few days, Lisa became obsessed with research. She read everything she could find about interdimensional theory, parallel universes, and quantum mechanics. She studied ancient symbols and modern mathematical models, and slowly, a terrifying possibility began to emerge. What if her birthmark wasn't just a birthmark? What if it was some kind of identifier, a mark that showed she was connected to something beyond her normal reality? The more she thought about it, the more sense Zara's words made. You carry the mark. You are connected to more than you know. It will notice you. Lisa began having strange dreams. In them, she would see herself working in what looked like her laboratory. But everything was slightly different. The equipment was more advanced, the walls were a different color, and outside the windows, the sky held to moons instead of one. In these dreams, she would be desperately trying to solve some kind of cosmic problem while alarms blared in the background. She would wake up with her heart racing and her birthmark tingling like it was trying to tell her something important. 1 week after her encounter with Zara, Lisa made a decision that surprised even herself. She stopped looking at the Orion region data. Instead, she redirected her research to other parts of the sky, despite the fact that those organized signals were still coming from that exact area. Every instinct told her she was making the biggest mistake of her scientific career. But Zara's warning echoed in her mind, for your safety and ours. But avoiding the data didn't make the dreams stop. If anything, they became more vivid and more urgent. She began to see flashes of other versions of herself, some working frantically at computers, others standing in front of massive machines she didn't recognize, all of them looking worried or frightened about something. 3 weeks had passed since Lisa's first encounter with Zara, and the scientist was beginning to wonder if she was losing her mind. The dreams were getting stronger. Her birthmark continued to tingle at random moments, and she had developed an almost constant feeling that she was being watched. She had started leaving work earlier and taking different routes home, though she couldn't explain why. It was on a quiet Thursday evening that Zara returned. Lisa was in her home office, a converted spare bedroom filled with books about physics and astronomy. She had been trying to make sense of some theoretical equations when the familiar tingling sensation filled the air. This time, she wasn't surprised when she looked up to see Zara materializing near her bookshelf. You stopped looking, Zara said, and Lisa could hear relief in the telepathic voice. That was wise. I have so many questions, Lisa said aloud, no longer caring how strange it was to have a conversation with a glowing interdimensional being. In her spare bedroom, Zara moved closer, her luminous form casting soft shadows on the walls. I know. And now it is safe enough to give you answers. The Watchers have moved on to other sectors. Watchers? The ones who would harm you if they knew what you truly are. Zara's large eyes studied Lisa's face with compassion. You exist in more places than just this reality, Dr. Rodriguez. Your birthmark is proof of this. Lisa felt her world shift slightly. What do you mean? More places? Imagine that reality is like a book with many pages, Zara explained, settling into a graceful position that might have been sitting if she weren't floating slightly above Lisa's reading chair. Most people exist on only one page, but some rare individuals exist across multiple pages simultaneously. You are one of these special souls. That's impossible, Lisa whispered, but even as she said it, she thought about her dreams of other laboratories and different skies. Your birthmark is what we call a dimensional anchor, Zara continued. It connects all the versions of you across different realities. In some worlds, you are a scientist like you are here. In others, you might be an artist, a teacher, or something else entirely. But you are all connected by that mark. Lisa's hand moved automatically to her shoulder. The dreams I've been having are glimpses of your other selves, and right now, one of those selves is in terrible danger. Zara's expression grew grave. In a reality very close to this one, another version of you discovered something in the Orion region, something that should have been left alone. She found a cosmic phenomenon that threatens to tear holes between dimensions. What kind of phenomenon? A black hole that feeds not on matter, but on the fabric of space-time. Itself, it grows larger by consuming the barriers between realities. If it does not stop, it will eventually reach this dimension and countless others. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine, and the other me is trying to stop it. She is trying. Yes, but she cannot succeed alone. The mathematics are too complex for one person to solve, even someone as brilliant as you. She needs help from someone who understands the problem from a different angle, someone like you. But I don't understand any of this, Lisa protested. I study radio signals from space. I don't know anything about interdimensional physics or cosmic black holes. Zara smiled, and the expression was both beautiful and sad. You know more than you think. Your mind has been touching these concepts through your dimensional connection. Why do you think you were drawn to study the exact region where the danger lies? Why do you think you could recognize patterns in the signals that others missed? Lisa thought about the organized transmissions she had detected, the ones that had seemed almost like a code. Those weren't alien communications, were they? They were, what, distress signals? They were your other self, trying to send warnings across dimensions. And you were receiving them because you are connected to her. The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of Lisa's computer. She tried to process what Zara was telling her. Multiple realities, dimensional anchors, cosmic threats. It sounded like something out of a science fiction movie. But the evidence was mounting. The dreams, the birthmark changes, the strange signals from space. What happens if this black hole continues to grow? Lisa asked quietly. Eventually, the barriers between realities will collapse entirely. All dimensions will merge into one chaotic space, where the laws of physics no longer work properly. Everything you know and love will be destroyed, along with billions of other worlds and countless versions of everyone who ever lived. Lisa leaned back in her chair, overwhelmed. And you think I can help stop this? I know you can. But the choice must be yours. Zara's form seemed to grow more solid, more present. I can take you to the dimension where your other self is working. Together, you two might be able to find a solution that neither could discover alone. But if you go, there is no guarantee you will be able to return to this life. The weight of the decision settled on Lisa's shoulders like a heavy blanket. Leave everything she knew to save worlds she had never seen? Risk her life to help a version of herself she had never met? But then she thought about her family, her friends, everyone on Earth who had no idea that their entire reality was hanging by a thread. If she did nothing and Zara was right, they would all be destroyed anyway. How long do I have to decide? Lisa asked. Zara's expression grew more urgent. Your birthmark has been growing stronger because the dimensional barriers are weakening. Soon, the connection will become too unstable to travel safely. You have perhaps 3 days. 3 days to decide whether to leave behind her entire life to become an interdimensional hero. Lisa looked at her hands, thinking about all the small moments that made up her daily existence, her morning coffee, her favorite research projects, the satisfaction of a good day's work. But she also thought about the dreams of her other self, working frantically to save reality itself, and she knew, deep in her heart, what her answer would be. Lisa spent the next 2 days in a state of complete inner chaos. She went through the motions of her normal life, eating breakfast, going to work, analyzing data. But her mind was somewhere else entirely. Every few hours, she would catch herself, staring at nothing, thinking about Zara's words and the impossible decision she had to make. On the second day, she found herself unable to concentrate at all. She kept making mistakes in her calculations and had to restart her analysis 3 times. Her colleague, Dr. James Peterson, finally knocked on her office door around lunchtime. Lisa, are you okay? He asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. James had been her mentor when she first started at the Institute 5 years ago, and he knew her well enough to recognize when something was seriously wrong. "I'm fine. Just tired," she lied, not looking up from her computer screen. "You've been acting strange for weeks now, and yesterday you seemed like you were in another world completely." James leaned forward, his kind eyes filled with genuine concern. "What's going on?" Lisa looked at her old friend and felt tears welling up in her eyes. James is like a father figure to her. If she left with Zara, she might never see him again. How could she explain that she was considering abandoning everything to save dimensions? "That might not even exist, James," she said slowly, hypothetically speaking, if you discovered that you could save millions of lives. But doing so meant giving up your own life as you know it. What would you do? James studied her face carefully. "That's a pretty heavy hypothetical question. Are we talking about some kind of research project that's gotten dangerous?" Lisa almost laughed despite her emotional state. If only it were that simple. Something like that. "Well," James said thoughtfully, "I suppose it would depend on how certain I was that those lives were really in danger, and that I was really the only one who could help." He paused. "But Lisa, if this is about some kind of risky experiment or field work, you know you don't have to face it alone, right? We're a team here." That evening, Lisa made a decision that surprised her. She called James and asked him to meet her at the observatory after hours. If she was going to leave this world behind, she needed at least one person to know the truth, and if something went wrong, maybe James could continue her work somehow. James arrived at 9 o'clock, looking puzzled but willing to listen. Lisa had prepared herself for this moment, but she still felt nervous as she began to speak. "James, I need to tell you something that's going to sound completely insane," she began. For the next hour, she told him everything: the encounter with Zara, the research about interdimensional beings, the dreams of other versions of herself, and the cosmic threat that was apparently growing stronger every day. James listened without interrupting, his expression growing more concerned with each detail. When she finished, they sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, James spoke. "Lisa, I'm worried about you. This sounds like you're under enormous stress. Have you considered that maybe you need to take some time off? See someone to talk through whatever's been bothering you?" Lisa had expected this reaction, but it still hurt. "I know how it sounds. But James, look at this." She pulled up her shirt sleeve to show him her birthmark. "Look how much more defined it's become over the past few weeks." James examined the mark closely, and she saw his expression change slightly. "It does look unusual, but birthmarks can change over time due to various factors." "What factors make a birthmark develop into a complex geometric pattern that resembles mathematical formulas for dimensional physics?" Before James could answer, the air in the room began to shimmer. Lisa's heart leaped as she recognized the familiar sensation. "She's coming," she whispered. "Who's coming?" James asked, but his question was answered as Zara materialized near the window. The older scientist's face went completely white. He gripped the arms of his chair so tightly that his knuckles turned pale. "What? Who? Hello." "Dr. Peterson," Zara said, her mental voice somehow reaching both of them. "Lisa thought you should witness this conversation." "This isn't possible," James whispered. "Many things that seem impossible are simply beyond our current understanding," Zara replied gently. "Dr. Rodriguez has told you about the threat to your dimension." James nodded weakly, unable to speak. "Time grows short," Zara continued, turning to Lisa. "The barriers weaken more each day. Your other self sent another message this morning. The cosmic disturbance has grown larger, and she believes she has perhaps 1 week before it becomes unstoppable." Lisa felt the weight of decision crushing down on her. "If I go with you, what exactly would I be walking into? A version of your world where the crisis has advanced much further. The sky there shows signs of dimensional stress, areas where reality itself appears fractured. Your other self has been working alone for months, trying to find a mathematical solution to contain the growing anomaly. She has the practical experience with the phenomenon, but she lacks a fresh perspective. You have studied similar cosmic events from a theoretical standpoint. Together, you might find an answer. And if we fail, then both dimensions and many others will eventually collapse into chaos. James finally found his voice. How do we know you're telling the truth? How do we know you're not some kind of, I don't know, advanced hologram or psychological manipulation? Sarah turned to him with what might have been amusement. Dr. Peterson, examine your instruments. James looked confused, but he walked over to the main console and began checking the readings. His face grew pale again. There are energy signatures here that our equipment shouldn't be able to detect. In the electromagnetic readings, he trailed off, staring at the numbers. These patterns don't match anything in our database. The presence of an interdimensional being creates ripples that your sensitive equipment can measure. Zara explained. This should provide some evidence that what Lisa has told you is real. Lisa stood up, her decision finally crystallizing in her mind. I have to go, don't I? If there's even a chance that all of this is true, I can't just ignore it and hope. Someone else will handle it. James turned to her with tears in his eyes. Lisa, you can't seriously be considering this. What's the alternative? If Zara's right, everyone I care about will be destroyed anyway if I do nothing. At least this way, there's a chance I can help. But what if you can't get back? What if something happens to you in this other dimension? Lisa walked over to her old friend and hugged him tightly. Then you'll know that I died trying to save the world. That's not such a bad legacy, is it? Zara's form began to glow more brightly. If you are coming, Dr. Rodriguez, it must be now. The dimensional window is opening. Lisa pulled away from James and looked around the observatory one last time. This place had been her second home for years. She thought about her apartment, her books, her plants that would need watering, all the small details of a life she was about to leave behind. James, if I don't come back, tell everyone that I went on an important research mission, and take care of my cat, okay? Before James could protest further, Lisa walked over to Zara. I'm ready. Are you certain? Zara asked. Once we begin the journey, there may be no returning to this exact reality. Lisa thought about her other self, working desperately and alone to prevent cosmic catastrophe. She thought about all the people in all the dimensions who had no idea their existence was threatened. She thought about the responsibility that came with being one of the rare people who could actually do something about it. I'm certain, she said. The journey between dimensions was unlike anything Lisa could have imagined. Zara took her hand, and suddenly the familiar observatory began to fade away like a photograph left too long in the sun. Lisa caught one last glimpse of James standing, frozen in shock before everything dissolved into swirling colors and impossible geometries. She felt like she was falling and flying at the same time. Reality seemed to bend and twist around them, showing her glimpses of countless other worlds. She saw versions of Earth where the oceans were purple, where 3 suns hung in the sky, where massive crystal formations grew from the ground like trees. Each reality flashed past in seconds, beautiful and terrifying in its strangeness. Do not be afraid, Zara's voice echoed in her mind. We travel through the spaces between worlds. What you see are other possibilities, other paths that existence has taken. The journey felt like it lasted both forever and no time at all. When solid ground finally formed beneath Lisa's feet, again, she found herself standing in what looked like her own laboratory, but everything was subtly wrong. The walls were a darker shade of blue, the equipment was more advanced, and outside the windows, the sky had an unsettling reddish tint with visible cracks running through it like broken glass. The dimensional damage, Zara explained, noticing. Lisa stared at the fractured sky. It grows worse each day. A door across the room opened, and Lisa saw herself walk in. But this other version looked exhausted and worried, with dark circles under her eyes and hair that hadn't been properly brushed in days. When the other Lisa saw her, she stopped dead in her tracks. You came, the other Lisa said, her voice filled with relief and amazement. I wasn't sure Zara would be able to find you, or that you believe her. It took some convincing. Lisa admitted, still staring at her alternate self. It was like looking in a mirror. but seeing someone who had lived through experiences she couldn't imagine. I know this is strange, her other self said. I'm still getting used to the idea that there are other versions of me out there. But we don't have much time for adjustment. Let me show you what we're dealing with. The other Lisa led her to a massive computer display that showed a three-dimensional model of space. Near the Orion constellation, in the center of the display was a swirling black void that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. It started as a normal black hole, her other self explained, but something changed its fundamental nature. Instead of just consuming matter, it began feeding on the structure of space-time itself. Every bit of dimensional fabric it consumes makes it stronger and hungrier. Lisa studied the display, her scientific mind immediately beginning to analyze. The data, the gravitational patterns are all wrong. It's like it's pulling on reality from multiple directions simultaneously. Exactly. And look at this. Her other self brought up another screen showing mathematical equations that made Lisa's head spin. I've been trying to find a way to reverse the process, or at least contain it. But every solution I come up with requires calculations too complex for one person to solve in time. Lisa looked at the equations and felt a spark of recognition. Wait, I've seen something like this before. In my dimension, I was working on theoretical models for cosmic phenomena. Different approach, but similar mathematics. For the next several hours, the two versions of Lisa worked together. Combining their knowledge and perspectives, Lisa shared the theoretical frameworks she had developed, while her other self provided practical data from direct observation of the anomaly. Slowly, a solution began to emerge. If we can create a counter-resonance at specific frequencies, Lisa suggested, we might be able to stabilize the dimensional boundaries. But the power requirements would be enormous. Her other self replied, more than any single planet could generate. What if we don't use just one planet? Lisa asked. What if we coordinate the effort across multiple dimensions? Use the dimensional connections themselves as a power source? Her other self stared at her for a long moment, then began frantically inputting calculations. That could work. That could actually work. But we need perfect timing across multiple realities. Zara, Lisa called out, is it possible to coordinate an effort like this across dimensions? Zara, who had been quietly observing their work, stepped forward. My people have the technology to synchronize activities across multiple realities. If you can provide the specifications, we can make it happen. The next few days blurred together in a frenzy of calculations, preparations, and coordination with Zara's interdimensional network. Lisa learned that there were beings like Zara, scattered across many realities, all working to maintain the stability of the dimensional barriers. When the moment finally came to implement their solution, Lisa felt a mixture of excitement and terror. If they were wrong, they might make the situation worse. But if they did nothing, the growing anomaly would eventually consume everything. Ready? Her other self asked. Ready, Lisa replied. They activated their carefully calculated counter-resonance, and the effect was immediate. The fractured sky outside began to slowly heal itself, the cracks sealing like wounds closing. The malevolent presence of the cosmic anomaly began to weaken and shrink. It worked. They had actually done it. As the crisis passed and the dimension stabilized, Zara approached Lisa with a small, crystalline device. This will allow you to communicate across dimensional barriers, she explained, and if you ever need to travel between realities again, it will help us find you. Lisa looked at the device, then at her other self, and finally at the healing sky outside. Can I go home now? Of course, Zara smiled. You have saved countless worlds, Dr. Rodriguez. Both versions of you. The journey back was gentler then. The trip over, and soon Lisa found herself standing in her familiar observatory. James was still there, looking like he hadn't moved since she left. How long was I gone? She asked. About 5 minutes, James replied weakly. But it felt like ours. Lisa looked down at her shoulder. Her birthmark had faded to a barely visible mark, no longer the prominent pattern it had been. But she could still feel a faint connection to something larger than herself. It's over, she said. We stopped it. We. James asked. Lisa smiled, holding up the crystal communicators Zara had given her. Let's just say I'm not alone in the universe anymore. From that day forward, Lisa's life was forever changed. She continued her work at SETI, but now she knew with certainty that there was intelligent life beyond Earth. Sometimes, late at night, she would use the crystal device to check in with her other self, comparing notes and sharing discoveries. And sometimes, when the night sky was particularly clear, she could swear she saw Zara's gentle form among the stars, watching over all the dimensions with quiet guardianship. Lisa had learned that being different wasn't something to hide from, but something that might just save the world.